little bit about the Tyson brothers. These were photographers that had a studio in the town of Gettysburg at the time of the Civil War. So, let's see. Some of what I'm going to be talking about is, of course, based on the research of my good friend, William A. Frasinito. And, he talks about the Tyson brothers primarily in his book, Gettysburg, A Journey in Time, and, of course, early photography at Gettysburg. And you really need to read both books, the section on the Tysons, to understand what he's saying. It's interesting that when he wrote early photography 20 years after A Journey in Time, he mentioned several times in it that you have to go back and read that book before you can read the update in the new book, so he can continue to sell both books.
Then buy me a draft one.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that, he had initial impressions of the Tyson Brothers photographic series in his initial book, and he actually changes them or changes some of his conclusions when he gets to the new book. So if you've only read the old book, then some things have changed a little bit. Maybe we'll talk about that. But I thought I'd put the photograph from his, I guess that's from his Journey in Time dust jacket, his sweater vest there. And I'm here to tell you that I have seen that outfit. It is hanging on, it's on a hanger in his closet with plastic on it. And he hasn't worn it since he had that photograph taken for the dust jacket. Okay. And you might say, well, if I'm just going to be talking about stuff that Bill knows about, how come he's not talking to you tonight? Because he doesn't talk to people in a group. So, the Tyson brothers, Isaac and Charles Tyson, were from near Philadelphia. They are Quakers, and they came into this area around 1859 to open up a photographic studio. Originally, their photographic studio was in the McClellan House in the center of the town square. And it was there for 1859 and 1860. And at the end of 1860, they moved their studio to a building on York Street, a short distance away. And you can see advertisements in the paper for their original establishment in the square of Gettysburg and where they moved to on York Street. In the November Gettysburg Compiler, November 1860, I forget which exact date, it notes that David Wills, Esquire, is having erected a two-story dwelling adjoining his residence on York Street, intending for storerooms and a Daguerrean saloon, for which purpose it will be also adapted. So when David Wills was constructing the building next to his house on York Street that would be used to house 4 or 5 businesses, he also at that time had already talked to the Tysons, and so they put a skylight and a photographic studio on the second floor of the building. So it's very helpful for the photographers to actually have this process going on during the construction of the building. And of course, that building still stands connected to the Wills house. You can see by the bricks on the front of it that it is has been altered over the years. The second story, the bricks are pretty much as they would have been at the time of construction. But I should mention that at one time there was a huge central bay window put on the front of the building that ran through the middle, through the top and the bottom. But theoretically, most of the top second floor is the original building. And you can read in the newspaper where there are different advertisements for businesses in this location. And of course, in early 1861, they moved in January. I think they opened up on like January 15th. They have articles in the paper describing the Excelsior Skylight Gallery in the newspaper. You can see their advertisements are quite extensive as to the different services they offer. There had been photographic studios in Gettysburg prior to this. There had been, intermittent photographers that would come into the area and record your image. Samuel Weaver had opened up a studio, and at the time of the battle, it was running on Middle Street, and he had a couple guys from out of town that had rented the gallery, and they were running it. But really, the Tyson brothers brought photography to Gettysburg in a big way, and everyone in the area was able to go there and have their photograph recorded. Now, this was a studio where people would go in and have their photographs taken, and it would be converted into, of course, CDVs or visiting cards. And the Adams County Historical Society is filled with examples of Tyson brothers photographs. And of course, here's one I just chose that shows their wall with a chair. I can generally look at a photograph now that was taken in the area, and just by what chair appears in it, or the backdrop, or the carpet, tell you which of the photographic studios it was recorded in. But imprinted on the back of it, usually it'll tell you the studio. So this is a guy, I don't remember his name, but he's a soldier in the 21st Pennsylvania Cavalry. So this was taken sometime after the battle. So this is a local unit in the regular photographic studio. Occasionally, there would be a photograph taken of a whole family, and he would have to back his camera up. I do have a really good example where you see not just the wall, but on both sides of the wall, the windows that look out of the building. Now, of course, I'm sure some of you know early on, they hired people to assist them in their day-to-day photographic studio operations. And their apprentice, starting in 1860, was William H. Tipton, who started there when I believe he was like 9 or 10 years old. Of course, this photograph is from William Frassinito's private collection. And of course, eventually, William H. Tipton would take over ownership of the Tyson Brothers Photographic Gallery, and all of the Tyson's photographs would be continued to be reprinted under his name. And he was active up until his death in 1929. So not only are there available around town in flea markets and on eBay and in antique malls copies of the Tyson Brothers photographs with their own imprint on them, but oftentimes their photographs are reprinted continuously over the years by William H. Tipton, especially their battlefield views. But there are popular photographs recorded in the studio or that they managed to acquire from someone else that are also continuing to be reprinted. And here I wanted to point out on the left, I didn't have a very good example of it for the show tonight, but there's the Tyson Brothers, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania imprint. Now, at the time of the battle, their photographic studio was on York Street, and it was active up until the fighting started. There is actually a letter that was printed in the Philadelphia Weekly Times, I think in the 1880s. It was an article about the battle by a member of the 10th New York Cavalry that was stationed in Gettysburg in 1862. And again, they were here at the time of the battle. And there was a guy named Noble Preston, and Charles Tyson had become friends with him, and he got Tyson to write him a letter describing his battlefield experiences. And in this letter, he talks about how that prior to the fighting, there were soldiers in town, and on the morning of July 1st, he went down to the studio, and there was a line of people wanting their photograph taken. So he actually recorded images of soldiers who were in the battle on the morning of July 1st. Now, over the years, there have been many people that have said, look, a photograph of a soldier with the imprint Tyson on it, it obviously was taken on the morning of July 1st. And I have never seen a photograph recorded by them on the morning, I mean, how would you know, right? It would have to be a soldier in a Gettysburg unit. And we would have to have proof that that soldier did not stay around town after the battle. Every one of these photographs that people have showed me that they say is recorded during the battle in the studio, every one of them is actually a soldier who was wounded and stayed around Gettysburg for a few weeks, or a doctor, or a hospital steward, or more than likely, the ones who are unknown, a local Gettysburg unit. It was local Gettysburg men who had joined the Army, who were going to their studio throughout the entire American Civil War and getting their photographs recorded in the studio. That is the person most likely to have their photograph taken in the studio, not someone who just happened to be there for a few hours on the morning of July 1st. So about midday on July 1st, he flees